Israel and Iran are two powerful nations located in the complex and often turbulent region of the Middle East. Geographically, they do not share a border. Several other countries, such as Iraq and Jordan, lie between them. Despite this physical distance, they have been locked in a bitter rivalry for decades, a conflict often described as a shadow war. This long-standing animosity stems from deep political and ideological differences. Following the Iranian Revolution in 1979, the new leadership in Tehran adopted a strong anti-Israel stance, viewing it as an illegitimate state and an extension of Western influence in the region, setting the stage for decades of hostility. The primary driver of the tension that ultimately boiled over into direct conflict has been Iran's nuclear program. Israel, which is widely believed to possess its own undeclared nuclear arsenal, has long viewed the prospect of a nuclear-armed Iran as an existential threat to its very survival. For years, Israeli leaders have vowed to take any action necessary to prevent Tehran from acquiring a nuclear weapon. This has led to a clandestine war of sabotage, cyber attacks, and assassinations targeting Iranian nuclear scientists and facilities, actions designed to delay and disrupt Iran's progress without triggering a full-scale conventional war. This shadow war was also fought through proxies across the Middle East. Iran built a network of allied militant groups in countries like Lebanon, Syria, and Yemen, using them to exert influence and threaten Israel from its borders. Groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon and various militias in Syria have been armed and funded by Iran, creating a constant source of friction and low-level conflict with Israeli forces. Israel, in turn, has conducted countless airstrikes in Syria to degrade the capabilities of these groups and prevent the transfer of advanced weaponry, keeping the conflict contained but perpetually simmering just below the surface of all-out war. The situation reached a critical point in early 2025. The International Atomic Energy Agency reported that Iran had significantly accelerated its uranium enrichment, bringing it closer than ever to the threshold of producing weapons-grade material. Diplomatic efforts led by European nations in Geneva failed to achieve a breakthrough, and the United States intelligence community remained divided on Iran's ultimate intentions. For Israel, the time for covert action and diplomacy appeared to be over. The belief that Iran was on the verge of becoming a nuclear power created an urgent and perilous calculus, pushing the region toward the precipice of a direct and devastating confrontation. The long-dreaded direct war erupted around the middle of June 2025. Acting on its long-standing threats, Israel initiated the conflict with a series of extensive airstrikes targeting key sites within Iran. The stated goal of this massive operation was to cripple Iran's nuclear program and prevent it from developing a nuclear bomb. This preemptive strike marked a dramatic shift from the previous shadow war, moving the conflict out of the shadows and into the open. The Israeli military action was a clear signal that it would no longer tolerate what it perceived as an imminent threat, thereby crossing a red line and triggering an immediate and forceful response from Tehran. Iran's retaliation was swift and powerful, unleashing a massive barrage of ballistic missiles and explosive drones aimed at targets deep inside Israel. This marked the first time the two nations had engaged in such large-scale direct military exchanges on each other's home territory. Iran deployed some of its most advanced long-range missiles, including the Khorramshahr-4, which is capable of carrying multiple warheads and overwhelming air defense systems. The skies over the Middle East became a new battlefield, as both nations demonstrated their willingness and capability to strike one another from hundreds of miles away, transforming a regional rivalry into a full-blown missile war. The fighting quickly escalated into a dangerous tit-for-tat cycle of attacks. Israel responded to the Iranian missile barrages by intensifying its own air campaign, striking not only military and nuclear sites, but also government buildings in the capital, Tehran. The Israeli defense minister ordered the military to focus on targets that could destabilize the Iranian regime. In return, Iran continued to launch waves of missiles and drones aiming for critical infrastructure, military bases, and even residential areas in Israeli cities. This pattern of attack and counterattack created a volatile and unpredictable situation, with each side determined to inflict maximum damage on the other. On June 21st, the conflict saw a major escalation when the United States entered the fray directly. American B-2 stealth bombers, armed with powerful GBU-57 bunker buster bombs, along with Tomahawk cruise missiles, struck three of Iran's most important and heavily fortified nuclear facilities at Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan. U.S. President Trump announced that the sites had been completely and totally obliterated and issued a stark warning against any further retaliation from Iran. This direct American intervention fundamentally changed the dynamics of the war, internationalizing the conflict and raising the stakes for the entire global community, adding a superpower's military might to an already explosive situation. The war inflicted a devastating toll on both nations, with civilians bearing the brunt of the violence. In Iran, the combination of Israeli and American airstrikes resulted in significant casualties. According to human rights organizations, by June 22, the attacks had killed at least 865 people and wounded over 3,300 more. Key military commanders from Iran's powerful Quds force were among the dead. The strikes hit densely populated areas, including government buildings in Tehran and missile launch sites near cities like Tabriz and Kermanshah. The destruction of infrastructure and the constant fear of air raids brought daily life to a standstill for millions of Iranians. Israel, despite its sophisticated multi-layered air defense systems like the Iron Dome and David's Sling, was not immune to the destruction. While authorities claimed to have intercepted over 450 missiles and 1,000 drones, many still broke through. Iranian missile strikes killed at least 25 people and wounded over 900 across the country. Major cities felt the impact directly. A missile slammed into the busy docks in Haifa, injuring 45 people, while another hit a hospital in southern Israel, wounding 80. Residential buildings in central Israel and Beersheba were also damaged, forcing ordinary families to spend their days and nights in fear, rushing to bomb shelters with every siren. The damage to critical infrastructure and scientific institutions was immense. In Israel, a direct missile hit on the prestigious Weizmann Institute of Science, a world-renowned research center, caused an estimated $300 to $500 million in damages, setting back scientific progress. In Iran, the attacks were even more widespread. Beyond the obliteration of the nuclear facilities at Isfahan, Natanz, and Fordo, airstrikes also targeted a major weapons research center and air bases in Dezful. The destruction of these high-value strategic assets represented a significant blow to Iran's military and scientific capabilities, with long-term consequences for its national security and development programs. Life for ordinary citizens in both countries was profoundly altered. In Israel, the government approved a $28 million emergency plan to build new bomb shelters and renovate existing ones, reflecting the new reality of a sustained threat. In Iran, the populace faced a dual crisis of external attack and internal pressure. The constant air raids, combined with the loss of key national infrastructure, created an atmosphere of fear and uncertainty. For families on both sides, the abstract geopolitical conflict had become a terrifying reality, defined by the wail of sirens, the rush to safety, and the constant anxiety of not knowing where the next missile would land. The eruption of open war between Israel and Iran sent shockwaves across the globe, prompting widespread condemnation and urgent calls for peace. The United Nations Security Council convened in an emergency session, where diplomats urged both sides to cease hostilities immediately. The European Union, along with key regional powers like Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, and Egypt, issued strong statements calling for de-escalation and a return to diplomacy. These nations, many of them neighbors to the conflict, feared the war could spiral into a wider regional conflagration that would destabilize the entire Middle East and disrupt the global economy. In response to the escalating violence and the direct American intervention, nations began taking drastic measures to protect their citizens and interests. The United Kingdom and Switzerland quickly withdrew their embassy staff from Tehran, while countries like Canada and India launched emergency operations to evacuate their nationals from the war zone. The skies over Iran, Israel, and neighboring countries were closed to all commercial air traffic, causing massive disruptions to global travel. In a sign of the spreading fear, nations like Bahrain and Kuwait activated national emergency protocols, opening public shelters and preparing their populations for the possibility of being drawn into the conflict. The economic and informational fallout was immediate and far-reaching. Global oil prices surged amid fears that the conflict could disrupt critical shipping lanes in the Persian Gulf, a vital artery for the world's energy supply. Interestingly, the Israeli stock market saw a brief surge following the news of the successful U.S. strikes on Iran's nuclear sites, reflecting investor confidence that the immediate threat had been diminished. Meanwhile, the information landscape became another battleground as a torrent of misinformation, including sophisticated AI-generated deepfakes and fake combat footage, flooded social media, making it incredibly difficult for the public to distinguish fact from propaganda. This conflict stands as a stark and terrifying reminder of the dangers of unresolved geopolitical rivalries, especially when the specter of nuclear proliferation is involved. The direct missile exchanges have demonstrated how quickly a long-simmering shadow war can escalate into a devastating conventional conflict, with catastrophic human and economic costs. The immediate challenge for the international community is to broker a ceasefire and pull both nations back from the brink of an even wider war. Ultimately, finding a sustainable and lasting peace will require addressing the root causes of the conflict, particularly the mutual distrust and the existential fears surrounding Iran's nuclear ambitions, to ensure such mayhem is never repeated.